Hey guys, what is up, and I welcome each and every one of you to a new League of Legends video. So today we'll be going over the first patch of Season 9, patch 9.1, but keep in mind the actual season itself doesn't start until another week or two later. Also, apparently the patch 9.1 notes did get leaked, so we will be going over essentially the official notes before they have been released. Now, as usual, this video will be made in collaboration with ProGuides. It's a website that helps you improve your overall League of Legends gameplay and knowledge, and especially with Season 9 coming up, this might be the perfect time to check them out. The link is down below. And as usual, if you end up enjoying the video, then don't forget to hit that like button. So starting things off, let's talk about some changes coming over to Kalista. Overall, Kalista's offensive strength is no longer tied to being near her Oathsworn target, and her ability to turn red into a better smite is also a lot worse. However, in return, she does get a bunch of more personal power that she can use in any situation, which I think is going to be a worthy trade-off. So in other words, her base stats got increased, her Q ability's damage got increased, but her E ability got nerfed and her W ability technically got nerfed as well. Now this is obviously a champion we don't see very often anymore, and she's a champion that, if she's strong, is way too strong, so Riot has to be very careful with what they do to Kalista. Moving along, we have some pretty big changes coming over to Mr. Ornn. So starting off with his base stats, you can see across the board it just has been overall slightly increased, which is a pretty big plus. And as we move into his passive, it got massive buffs as well, where you can see here, Ornn now gains 10% additional armor and magic resist from items, which is actually quite insane. At level 13, any upgradable item that Ornn owns or purchases for the rest of the game is upgraded for free. We can have up to 2 upgraded items at a time. And also as he reaches level 14 and onwards, Ornn can upgrade one of his allies' upgradable items by getting within 600 range and clicking on them. And as if that wasn't enough, he also has new items he can upgrade into now, one of them being called Frozen Fist, the Yomu's Wraithblade, Might of the Ruined King, and Luden's Pulse. Quite excited about the Luden's Pulse and the Yomu's Wraithblade, I have to admit. 25 lethality is insane. However, at the cost of his passive being completely overbuffed, he did get some nerfs in the other aspects of his kit. For instance, his Q cost, damage, and slow have all been decreased. His W doesn't shield Ornn anymore, but at least now it makes him unstoppable, and his R slow knockup has also been decreased. So it seems like Ornn is a bit more focused on the utility tank aspect rather than just the sole purpose of being an only tank champion. However, if you ask me, this is actually an overall pretty big buff to him because tanks are very rewarding in League of Legends with how Riot decides to balance the game. And tank items are extremely cost efficient, especially with his new passive giving him 10% increased resistances. So all in all, I think this is going to be a pretty massive buff for Ornn, and you might want to watch out for him in the next patch. But speaking of pretty insane changes, we also have some pretty insane changes coming over to Sejuani. Yet another tanky champion that we haven't really been seeing too often in solo queue nor competitive. But similar to Ornn, Sejuani's base stats across the board have also been increased. Then as we move on to her passive, you can see that the passive grants less stats overall, however it does last longer. Her Q damage has just overall been increased. The second W that she does, the damage on this has been increased, but the slow falls off almost immediately. And the damage on her E ability has been increased by a lot, even though that the duration of the stun and the range has both been decreased. In other words, the damage on Sejuani has been increased a lot on every single ability. The CC overall on this champion has been slightly decreased, which is kind of an interesting approach, to be honest. I'm not sure why they would do this, but don't be surprised if Sejuani decides to one-shot you in the next patch, especially if she builds actual damage items. Moving along, let's talk about some changes coming over to other champions like Ashe, another champion that we also haven't really been seeing too often. Now, this probably won't bring her back, but it's still a nice buff. Essentially, her E ability Hawkshot now grants assists if enemies were previously unseen. So for instance, let's say the enemy jungler is doing his red buff. You throw your Hawkshot over to the red buff to scout, you happen to find him as your jungler is invading, and since your E initially revealed that champion and then your jungler, let's say, also kills them, you actually get an assist for that. However, if you throw it in the middle of a team fight, since you already have vision of every single enemy champion, you actually get a 0 assist for that. Like I said, probably not enough to bring her completely back into the meta, but at least it's something. Next up, we have a quick buff coming over to Mr. Aurelion Sol. Now, Aurelion Sol's Q can be recast earlier, so now at 0.25 seconds since he uses it rather than 0.65 seconds in turn. This means that his ability to fight melee champions is going to be more powerful since it doesn't have that minimum duration it has to travel, and you can most likely stun melee champions unless they are directly on top of you. So even though this seems like a very small buff, I think this is actually going to be quite a big one when it comes to Aurelion Sol. Moving along, we have yet another buff coming over to AD carries. Again, this is a patch that is trying to bring back the AD carry role at least a little bit. The W cast time now scales with attack speed for Jinx. This is actually quite good because now you can actually hit people with your W, since at the moment it is fairly hard to hit. There's a decent wind up time and everything, but now as you get later on to the game, the W will just be overall much faster and much easier to land. Next up, a very quick quality of life buff coming over to Jayce, to where now his QE combo can be buffered. So in other words, if you use your E ability while you're using your Q ability, it'll actually put them together almost at the same time. Ignore any other actions until those abilities are out, and thus just kind of making it a little bit easier to essentially double tap the abilities and get a very quick EQ combo out. Next on the list, we have some quick changes coming over to Katarina, more specifically towards her E ability Shunpo. So at the moment when you're playing Katarina, there is a very slight delay before and after your Shunpo. So when you initially use it and when you actually land at the target. Now instead, when you use your Shunpo on a target or a dagger, you instantly go. There's literally no delay whatsoever, but all that delay from before has been converted and combined into the post teleport. So in other words, after you E to your target, you will have a very slight delay before you can do another action. But again, the delay is only 0.15 seconds, so it's nothing crazy. Next up, we have some, I believe, controversial changes coming over to Nasus, where his Q stacks from large kills has been overall increased to now being 12 per champion, large minion, or large monster, up from 6. Not only does this mean that he'll be just stacking up a lot faster when playing him in the top lane, when getting cannons, when maybe just smacking the enemy champion for harass, but this also means, and maybe even more so, that Nasus might become a jungle champion, since now he can stack up those stacks so fast in the jungle, and there's literally nothing stopping him from doing so, that this might be the return or even the introduction of Nasus jungle. So watch out for this champion in the next patch. Next, we have some more changes coming over to the AD carry, starting off with some Sivir changes. Champion hits don't reduce Q's damage, and that's going to be the only change. So again, not the craziest buff in the entire world, but at the end of the day, a buff is still a buff. But at least this does mean that her Q ability in teamfights is going to be quite powerful, so watch out for that. Following the Sivir changes, we also have some changes coming over to Vayne, which I did make a video about, making a full gameplay that I highly recommend checking out. The Q cooldown has been reduced while R is active by 50%. So in other words, when you have your ultimate active, you'll be tumbling much more frequently and thus also getting the invisibility much more frequently as well. And this is actually a very solid buff for Vayne, especially if you go Essence Reaver, but that might be a little bit overkill. But I honestly believe that this might be enough to bring Vayne back into the meta, so make sure you're starting to prepare to face her in the next patch, or even learn her if you're an AD carry player, because she's going to be pretty strong. Next up, we have some changes coming over to Ziya. The E root duration has been increased from 1 second to 1.25 seconds, and that is about it. An extra 0.25 seconds in a teamfight is surprisingly a decent amount, so it is more than it seems initially on paper, but at the end of the day, it's still not a big change like, for instance, a Vayne's change. And the last change coming in for champions is going to be towards the Zyra, where her Q plus W and her E plus W combos can now both be buffered. Similar concept as to the change that happened to Jayce that I talked about earlier in the video as well. But now let's talk about some other changes coming to League of Legends, one of which being the jungle items. So ever since the new preseason patches came in, Riot actually removed Monster Hunter, which was essentially something they added to prevent gold funneling. Now people are starting to gold funnel once again because you can, and Riot is once again reintroducing a way to stop it. So unenchanted jungle items reduce gold from minions if their owner has too much minion gold. In other words, they're bringing back essentially what they had earlier, which should just essentially prevent any potential gold funneling strategies, which are very unfun to face and are very overpowered as well if you do them correctly, especially in solo queue, since most people are not going to have any idea as to what to do against it. Following this, we also have some changes coming over to runes, more specifically the Keystone Hail of Blades. Attack speed bonus is higher early now with a lower rate, but attack resets no longer consume a stack. So as I'm sure most of you know, Hail of Blades gives you a lot more attack speed for the first 3 auto attacks, which is actually quite useful. But now, if you're a champion like maybe Vayne, maybe like Nasus, Jax, whenever you're doing your auto attack reset, it essentially adds an extra charge to Hail of Blades, thus giving you more resets and more attack speed overall, and just making it a lot more powerful on those kind of champions. So this will be pretty interesting to see how people abuse Hail of Blades on auto attack reset champions in the next patch, so watch out for that. But speaking of runes and speaking of Riot trying to kind of buff up the AD carries and bring them back in this patch slowly, the rune stats for attack speed have overall been increased. So you know those little runes that you can add, there's 3 options at the very bottom right on the rune pages, well that one has been increased by a single %, so now it's 10% rather than 9. Celerity has also received a slight buff, so now it's at 10% rather than 8% for the movement speed bonus multiplier, and shield bash has also received an increase in damage overall. And last but definitely not least, we also have some changes coming over to the turret assist that states the following. The gold sharing proximity radius on turret takedowns have overall been increased, and additional radius for assist have been added. So in other words, champions within 1200 range of a turret are counted toward turret gold distribution whether or not they actually assisted in the takedown of the turret. But on top of this, champions within 2500 range who assisted in turret takedowns now also count towards the turret gold distribution, including the first turret bonus. And the very final thing in this patch is also going to be some new skins coming out, such as Blood Moon Pike, Sivir, Aatrox, and Blood Moon Aatrox Prestige Edition. On top of that, also we have chromos coming out for Blood Moon Pike and Blood Moon Sivir. But that right there, guys, is going to be it for this video. There you have it, all of the changes coming in patch 9.1. Technically the first patch of season 9, since it's the first patch to have the number 9 in it, even though the season itself for ranked actually starts in just about a week or two. But either way, guys, let me know what you think about these changes down below in the comment section. Don't forget, this is a leaked patch note, so this should be the exact changes coming out. But thank you all so much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, then don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't, and make sure you check out my other videos as well, and I'll see you for the next one. Peace.